Welcome to the Security Today podcast. I'm your host, Uncle Baer, and I am back for another week with Bid2Bank. This podcast is brought to you by Sprinter Business Solutions, so check them out at sprinterit.com. And this segment, we are trying to sit down with some of the best entrepreneurs out there in the security world and go over some of the sections that work your way from the very beginnings of the bid all the way to putting the cash in the bank. And I am here again with another one. I'm excited about this one. I've had a lot of guys on here that I actually have known and have communicated with a lot, and I finally started branching out. And so one of the first ways that I wanted to go is with Chad Lingafelt here with LockDoc. And so you can follow them on Instagram. I've been following them for quite a while as they've grown into multiple storefronts, and the business is, actually running itself now, as Chad's going to get into. But I wanted to have him on here and to kind of go through the Bid2Bank process of maybe how LockDoc does it or has done it to get to where they're at. And so we'll let Chad introduce himself here. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate you being here. And I can't wait to get into some of these questions today.
Yeah, man. Hey, thank you very much for inviting me on. It's as I said earlier, it's very odd for me to be on this side of the interview, and pretty excited about it. But again, it's pretty cool to meet. We've never met in person before, but obviously follow each other on the world of social media. And so, I mean, you're pretty famous. So that's probably one of the highest profile people that I've spoken with in quite some time. So thank you for allowing me to come on.
Not a problem. It's a niche famous. It's like maybe 12 guys think I'm pretty cool, but yeah, so let's just get directly into it then. So where we start on this podcast is usually with the marketing and sales. So maybe give us, before you jump into this question, which I'll ask first, but then give us a little rundown of LockDoc, where you came into the scene. Sure. And that sort of thing. But after you do that, maybe then you can tell us some of the different types of marketing software or sales tech that you've used over the time that you've been with LockDoc that has helped you acquire some of the jobs that has helped the business grow.
Very, very, very cool. All right. Well, so LockDoc as a whole, just to kind of paint a picture, you can obviously find out a lot about it at lockdoc.net, LOCDOC. Fortunately, the founder of the company decided to leave the K's off, so that's always been a fun thing for us. But the company was founded in the early 80s, well before my time involvement with it. But since I've been here, myself and my business partner, Chris Lowry, we have worked diligently to try to create a organization that, one, is focused on helping our customers protect their people and their property. That's really what we do every single day. We solve people's problems around the world of security, from locksmithing all the way to electronic security. And we've just tried to compile a team together of people that are excited to do the same thing. One of the things that we found out was if we follow some of the things that we'll probably be talking about today in a very simplistic form, it opens us up to a lot of customers that really are looking for the type of services that we provide and offer. And so it's provided us the opportunity to continue to expand that. So started as the headquarters, very small, in Charlotte, North Carolina. In 2019, we did our first small acquisition of another company. 2020 was our second acquisition, which was down in the Anderson, South Carolina area, just south of Greenville, South Carolina. And that was our first really branch into retail and then expanding service offerings there. We just recently, within the last couple of months, launched down in Charleston, South Carolina, and we've got kind of future plans to continue to spin those up across North and South Carolina. Currently, we're sitting at just around 40 employees, and that's pretty much the makeup of what we do on a current day-to-day right now is we play in the commercial space exclusively and support our customer base in that side of things. From a marketing standpoint, it's an interesting question, especially around software. So, obviously, base level is SEO, website, and all those types of things. Outside of that, we don't really use any marketing software. We have tried to create a social presence and brand awareness, to use the corporate buzzwords. But we've tried to, make the green stick out, right? So when people are driving down the street and they see the awning of our building that I'm sitting in right now is lime green, and it's hard to miss it. All of our vehicles have a consistent logo and design on it, obviously to stand out and to have a presence there. Marketing's tactics outside of that, we are very much relationship driven, and that's how we have structured our sales organization. That's how we've structured what we do. Is we at all cost are really focused on helping our customers protect their people and their property, and we do that through relationships. So we're heavily involved in industry networks for the type of customers that we work well with. So commercial property management, we'll take that as an element. We are involved in an organization called IREM, the International Real Estate Management organization, network, whatever it's called. Anyways, they are focused on educating real estate property management for commercial. And so they have industry partners. We're industry partner. We show up at the events. We support the events. We sponsor the events, and basically just continue to make relationships there. But there's BOMA. There is Crew. You can list probably a dozen different industry networks that are that way, and if you go, hey, well, I don't really want to play in the commercial real estate market, I want to play in K through 12. Well, there's K through 12 networks as well, and so it's really wherever the market is that you're trying to go. That's how we've found the most success outside of that, and that is strictly based on the fact that we are hardcore business to business, B2B. Focused on the commercial aspect, and we're not typically looking for somebody to just dial us on, through Google or whatever. So we have a web presence, and we focus heavily on that, and we want to capture the social and the SEO standpoint, but we don't do a whole lot on marketing software, if that answers your question.
Yeah, definitely. That is awesome. So I feel like that's not been an answer yet. This is why I kind of love this segment, because you get into it and you get these new answers, which just flower all these questions in my head. So when you are helping that relationship in those events and those sort of things, you're talking about, like, when you say events, is it like maybe like a networking event at a restaurant or a bar, or is it like a convention center? What does that look like?
Yeah, so good question. So IREM does monthly luncheons where they have a subject matter expert that comes in to talk about, city infrastructure, whatever, because that's relevant to facility managers. And then you have an opportunity as an industry partner to help sponsor that. So you pay for the lunch, or maybe just have a booth or whatever. They all will typically have an annual trade show where they will have a 2-day event. They've got tons of education, and then they have a trade show there as well. But they also have fun entertainment events. Our local IREM chapter, because they have a lot of autonomy to be able to select and choose whatever they want to do, they came to us because we're big on coffee around here. They said, hey, will you put on a class around how to make coffee? Okay, cool. So we put on a morning event where they brought in facility managers and property managers, and we did a full-on, I think we have a video of it somewhere, but it was freaking awesome. We did, because in our office here, we have a full coffee bar. Showed them how to make espresso, showed them how to make siphon brew, pour over, French press, and then talked through the different elements about the origins of coffee beans and different grinding methods and all that stuff. Way nerd stuff on coffee that you would not expect. You come to a locksmith company and you think you're going to hear about how to cut a key, and we're sitting there and telling them the temperature rating for water to pour into their coffee because we're passionate about it. And we had people hang out for an hour afterwards, one, asking us more about what we did, but just having curious conversation because we provided something to them that was not just your standard these is the products and services that we offer. So just trying to get unique. And that's because that's something that we're passionate about. I mean, you might be passionate about something completely different. I've heard of people that do, they did, this one guy was like really big on low country boils. And so they did a whole class on that. It's whatever you're passionate about, trying to take it outside of the direct service that you offer, but creating that connection point there. So there's a lot of those types of events, and they're churning them up all the time because they're trying to create additional value for their industry as well versus just showing up and doing their work.
So when you show up to those events or you're hosting them and you're with those people, you're approaching it from a standpoint of just opening a relationship, saying, "Hi, I'm Chad. How's it going? Yeah, you've lived around here. We share similar things with kids." It's not necessarily like you're immediately trying to sell the product and service that's behind you.
For sure. And to be very clear, one, this may be shocking, but I am heavily introverted and I absolutely hate those networking events. Like that is, there's many things that I would rather do besides go to one of those. It's just not my forte. We have people that really enjoy it and are really good at it. It's one of the reasons why I sit behind a microphone a lot is because I feel more comfortable talking like this than I would going and making small talk at a network event. Again, trying to ease into what you're comfortable with. But yes, it's all about just making relationships, making connections, and not trying to sell. Like that's one of the things that I want to say that specifically for our company. We are not heavily focused on trying to sell somebody something. And going back to what I said earlier, the way we've structured our sales organization, we hire people based off of their personality type that are relationship builders, not salespeople. We want people that can build relationships, connect with people, listen to people, and respond. Like that's really what we're going after. We're not going after the aggressive, hardcore, cold call salesperson because I feel like that just puts a bad taste in for our industry because you're trying to oversell something.
Yeah, awesome. Okay, cool. Well, so that's great. Marketing strategy wise, especially with. I like that you guys are using consistent colors or you're using something to pop. I feel like in our industry, maybe the people that I've had conversations with that run their own security stuff or they're doing their own low volt stuff or even AV sometimes, they kind of forget the aspect of what they're appearing as because they know so much technical information that's what they're good at. And so once you get them behind a rack or once you get them at a doorknob or something like that, they're wizards. But to think about that view from the outside, not needing a locksmith and then seeing one, anything else on that you guys use marketing wise?
Here's the thing, like I feel like I'm very fortunate from a standpoint. The way that I grew up, a lot of my family heritage was all around pulling a kind of a package together and saying, hey, not only here's the real content, so we don't want to fluff the content more than it is, but here's content, and then here's an actual package around the content. And that's what, when I came to LockDock Security, before it was just called LockDock Inc., and the vans, we had 5 vans on the road, plain white Ford Econoline vans. Nobody had any clue as to who we were. We were ugly polo shirts with a logo that was blended in that you couldn't even see. No branding, no business cards. Like it was just nothing. And again, I came from an industry out of high school and early in my adulthood that was radio advertising and radio broadcast. And when you're in that world, telling people who you are is very important, and having a consistent brand. So, even from a tagline, if you're now whatever medium that you listen to things on, is having a constant tagline, creating that brand persona, right? And so as we started to develop, LockDock and tried to bring it into some more of a actual branding concept, it was just that, like, how do we create a logo that is defined, refined, and marketable, and then start to plaster it on everything, And we've gone through a couple of iterations where we're landed out right now. Obviously, I think is the best that we've had to this point. You can look back and we had some pretty rough stuff out there. But one of the first big things that we did in 2012 was we were involved in a network that had co-branding or co-op dollars, and we, as a small company that didn't have a whole lot of cash, utilized that opportunity to help logo and brand our vans. And it was a game changer for us because immediately overnight, it was like we were on the radar. We were literally, nobody knew us unless you knew us. We were just completely under the radar. And so once we saw that as a company, and I don't want to pretend like I had this vision of like, this is the way it's going to work. But once we saw it come to fruition, we were like, oh, we should probably do more of this. Like, how do we do? And then it's like, started the coffee cup stuff really came from beating our heads against the wall, because the typical thing, and I'll tell you this one little short story, hopefully, and not go crazy on a rant on your recording here, but we historically gave away. I had a select number of clientele that we would go to every year and give them a Christmas basket, and so it was a curated basket of consumable goods, and we would put a small sticker on it or leave a handwritten note that said, thanks for your business, Lockdock Security. And I was a part of this process for 2 years and was watching it and said, how do these people know, one, that this is from us, and two, after this food is gone, like, we're over. Like, we had our 13 seconds of notice, right? And so we started going back through and was like, what do people have with them all the time? That's one, not seasonal, and something that's on their desk, right? Something that they can use on a regular basis. And so we landed on this idea of doing a coffee cup. And so, because I thought, it was like, if it's a good coffee cup and it's reusable and it's nice, appealing, then it's going to sit on somebody's desk, and anytime that they're drinking it and they see Lock Dock or whatever, then it's a visual reminder. And if I can get that thing sitting on their desk close to 6 months out of a year, then that's a huge win, right? Like, you talk about ROI on marketing. I can put a $3 mug on somebody's desk for 6 months and it costs me pennies a day. So we went in, and the story that I like to tell people, because this is the honest to God truth, we were so cash strapped the first year that we did this, and I still have one of the cups because I procured one of them. It's on the shelf in our swag room. We dialed it down to the exact number. We ran a spreadsheet. We needed 232 cups because that's all we could afford, and that's the exact number that we were going to give out. I had it spreadsheeted every customer how many they were going to get, and we distributed 232 cups minus the one that I have sitting on the shelf in there. And it worked, and we got a lot of response on it. And then when we went back the second year and handed out the next set of coffee cups, people came out in the parking lot with their Lock Dock coffee cup, drinking out of it when we handed them the second one. I was like, this is the most amazing thing. And so, that's kind of has been our deal, right? For the last number of years, is that's what we do, is we give people coffee cups, and it sits on their desk. It's a front of mind. So that's, to your question about branding and the importance of it, I've got tens of thousands of green coffee cups in various sizes and shapes like you see behind me all across the country, but specifically focused around North and South Carolina. We're known for it. People enjoy them, and some people have collected all of them, and they'll send us photographs of them all the time. And that's really, like, you're winning at that point from a branding standpoint, because people are excited to drink out of your coffee cup, so they're not going to forget about you.
That's solid right there. That's these. I talk about these gold nuggets, or sometimes I say they're ripe peaches within the podcast. Sure. Like, it's like in the podcast, as we're talking about everything, it's like someone walking through a peach grove, and it's like there's these ripe ones that, and that's definitely one of them. Moving from the marketing and sales, going into kind of the engineering and quoting. And I know that we were talking before the podcast got started that the business is kind of running itself now, and your role looks different than it did 5-10 years ago. But from when you came in and you were in the white plain Econoline vans to where you're at now, what sort of methods and maybe tools did you use from the quoting side of things to help streamline those processes?
Okay, this is something that I'm excited about and very passionate about, because this is the one of the few things. Like I feel like a lot of times people talk about LockDoc around marketing, because that's that's what's out there visible. Our functional operations and processes is really probably one of the biggest thing that I'm excited about, because it's very transitional and it is built something that has a lot more fundamentally sound components of it than really anything. So when I first arrived at LockDoc, it was paper, pencil, Nextel direct connects. Like, that's the way we ran business. Yeah. And when the problem that we were having was to put a proposal together. So a customer calls us, we go out and we look at their facility. We're like, oh man, at that time, this is going to be a 4-door access control system. This is going to be amazing. The amount of time that it took us to write up all the information that we needed, precisely measure all of the cabling that we needed and all the components, then price it out from a supplier, and then figure out how to put a proposal together and send it to them was, one, incredibly long. It could have taken 2 weeks to do that. Then they sit on it for a month and then they approve it. Okay, so the customer then says, yes, we're ready to go. Now we have to go back and figure out what in the world we quoted, where we got our pricing from, how in the world we're going to go back and do this again, because we're now at a 2-month spread. And so the very first thing that we did is, give you like a little bit of a timeline transition here. So the very first thing that I did when it came to that was create an Excel spreadsheet at that time, which had one tab that was resourcing all of our services, one tab that resourced all of our a large number of our materials, and then it was like a 6-tab spreadsheet. Horrible, by the way. Like, I'm terrible at Excel, so don't pretend like I'm an Excel expert. But it was a methodology of trying to figure out how we get things organized and structured. So the first tab, you would put in a list of your materials and services, and then you could resource them from the other tabs that you had, and then you could flip to the second tab, and it would take all that data and basically make a customer version of it. So it simplified everything, hid part numbers and whatever else that we wanted to do, and then created like a printable PDF or a printable document that we could share with the customer. And that was the first time that we had a real organization around what we quoted, where we got pricing from, and what we said that we were going to do. So once it was approved, then all we had to do was go back to that file and we could pick up and go from there. So that was early iteration. And then everything, the challenge that we ran into that was everything was named a common name. So it was like, Bob's Convenience Store 4-door access control. And it was like, what did I name that file? So if you go back in. So that was like phase 1. So we were from paper and pencil, and then we went to an Excel spreadsheet. Huge improvements. And that took us from, 4 guys to 6 or 7 pretty rapidly, just by that alone, because at that point the work was done and you could hand that over to really anybody and they could know exactly what needed to be done. Previous, it was chicken scratch on a piece of paper, backside of a napkin. Side vent, I'll come back to this real quick. Second day on the job, I was riding with a guy. He was at the back of his van, Nextel Direct Connect, called into dispatch. Hey, where do I need to go next? The dispatcher starts telling him where he needs to go. He grabs a paper cup and writes down his job on a paper cup. Okay? Takes a last final swig of that paper cup, tosses it in the trash can, and we jump in the van. And he's like, where are we supposed to go? I was like, well, you wrote it down on that cup that you just threw away. And he's like, oh, man. And so he's got to climb back, dig through his trash can to figure out where we're going to go. Anyways, so we progressed from that to spreadsheets, and then basically went into our kind of today mode, right, where we build our own CRM, we build our own quoting and dispatch software. So a account manager now goes out and does a site walk. They tag doors with a QR code, take photographs of the inside and outside of the door, bring it back. They can do it in their vehicle or they can do it, on their mobile device, but a lot of them do it at the desk, and then they lay out basically the detailed task list description assigned to the doors with parts and services. And then once it's approved, it just goes through this mass amount of automation that sends it to purchasing. Purchasing knows what parts they're supposed to order, gets to the project manager. The project manager knows what order it's supposed to be done. And then there's this whole level of visibility. So the progression of a chicken scratch, which, again, every element that we saw through business growth allowed for a cap. So chicken scratch and handwritten estimates can take you to a certain amount of revenue, but it has its limitations because it's stuck with one person in one person's head. Spreadsheet took us to the next level of iteration and allowed another level of revenue, but it had its limitations because of the way that it was structured. Now into where we're at, it's almost limitless because whoever does the work, so as long as they do it correctly, it can be passed on to anybody, and there's no questions about it because it's all documented. It's pretty much a walk through the building, and you can see the photographs, and you know exactly what's supposed to be done. So it's transferable and scalable at a higher level.
And you guys built that yourselves?
Yeah, so we went through several iterations of software development over the years. That's probably its own separate podcast. But we landed in the late 2009, 2010 era with a platform that allows you to build software on top of it. And so we have had multiple iterations of it to this point, but everything that we've done has been in-house. We've got one additional security company that's licensed on it right now, and we're continuing to work to try to make it an easier onboard for licensing on it. So you can think, ESC but better, Service Fusion, any of those companies out there, any of those pieces of software, very similar to that, but very catered to the locksmith and security industry because we really focus around openings and master key system management and then attach all the other components back to it.
Now, when you were starting to build that or looking towards the future, thinking we need what you have today in place, where would someone begin to develop that in their head or in a paper? Is it through Google searching and just figuring out what works, or did you delegate it out to hiring someone who is more of an expert on it or something like that?
Yeah, so the early iterations, I mean, you got to think back, 2010, this company was 2010 barely touching $1 million in revenue. Everybody, all hands on deck, were doing the work, right? So there's not a lot of spare cash sitting around in an organization like that. So a lot of it was, passion type projects. Like we want to try to build something that's going to benefit us because we've got a chasm. Now, and you also have to think back, and I feel like I date myself, and I'm sitting here, seeing my reflection on the screen and see gray hair on the side of my head, which really makes me feel old. But there wasn't a lot of software, and there wasn't web-based software in 2010. Like that was a whole different era. You got to think that was 2 years after the iPhone was released. Like it was a whole different world. Having internet accessible while you're driving around was a very new concept at that point. So, but we were a mobile service company, and we needed to have information available instantaneously, in real time, just like you expect today. We needed it back then. So there wasn't a whole lot to work with. But the concept that we had was every door that we touch is its unique thing, right? Now, we may do a lock and a key on one door, and we may do a door closer on another door, and we may put a new lock set, and we may put a key card system on another door. Like, they all have their variations of it, but they all come back to an opening. And so as we started to develop it, that was just kind of our core component, is every opening really is its own individual unique thing, and we don't really care a whole lot else around it. It's there, and it's attached to a building, and we have a collection of those. And then we also have key systems that we have to manage. And those were the two unique things that there's not any software out there that really brought all that together, especially at that point. And then on top of that, dispatching. So most every company that I know of has, a stack of software that they utilize to be able to deploy that. So we go here for dispatching, and we go here for this information, here for this information. And we just wanted to bring it all together to where I'm a technician and I show up on a job site and I go, yep, I'm here at this facility. This is the door I'm working on, and this is what it's keyed to, and this is what I changed it to, and let me charge for the services and move on. Like, it should just be that simple. So that's where we started from. There wasn't a whole lot of architecture around it. And to answer your question, it was whiteboards. I've got probably 1,000 photographs of whiteboards with random diagrams going, hey, what if we connect this to this and move this to here? Will it work? And then you test it, you try it, it fails, it sucked, you fix it, you try it again, and then, finally you land on something that's functional.
Can you speak to maybe some of the importance of finding the time to do that as also being the owner? Because I feel like a lot of guys who are in the field, and they might even have guys, but they're running their own shop too. Mm-hmm. I know that the locksmith I worked for, it was like hard pressed to get him to sit down and just like dream about something, because he had to get it work done, So can you touch on that a little bit?
So, again, you get into some passion points for me. So, same thing, right? Like, you and we talked about this, I think, before we started. I started as a rookie locksmith. I ran a service truck. Like, I've been through all the iterations. The theory was we're spending more time. It's like this realization that you're spending more time doing it the hard way than stopping and trying to figure out how to do it the right way. Now, if I were to say I had a crystal ball and understood all that at that time, would be absolutely ridiculous. But we did just hardcore stuff. Go run a service truck, do the day-to-day business during the normal day, and then 4 o'clock in the afternoon, 5 o'clock in the afternoon, I would get started on these types of things. Me and my business partner would get started on these types of things, and I would work until 10, 11 o'clock at night on them. We did all-day build-out sessions on a Saturday and a Sunday. Just some crazy stuff, But there were points through business growth that you have such pain, right, around what you're doing, that you're willing to do anything to change it. So built in, kind of unique to me, or maybe not unique to me, but part of my personality is that I can go hardcore for kind of the next level, right? So if I can see that there's light at the end of the tunnel, then let's put our nose down. If it's going to put us 100 hours in that we've got to do this and we can get some reprieve from it, then let's go do that. And so, the phrase that you hear is working on your business and not in your business. And here's the situation. And this is what I've kind of come to realize. A lot of practitioners, so small business owners that run the business and are really, really good at what they do. They're really good technicians, really good locksmiths, whatever. They don't have, so as a point of reference through personality assessments, they are highly skeptical individuals with a very low trust level of people. So that's going to put me in a position where I struggle to trust that people are going to do things the right way, and I'm the only one that can do it correctly. When I get myself locked into that mental position, then I am I'm holding back other people from excelling, and I am putting myself in a position where I have to be the expert on everything. So therefore, I don't have time to go in and fix things or put effort into trying to improve the business as a whole, because I'm literally stuck in I have to solve every problem. And so people are listening to this and they're going to go, yeah, that's my business. I got, I'm the only one that knows how to do it right. Well, at a point, you have to realize that you are not the only one that can do it right, and you're going to have to implement trust with other people. Now, that's an easier said than done, but that's the sticking point where you see a lot of businesses hit a plateau. So they've hired people, and maybe they've hired 4 or 5 people, maybe 6, maybe 7, and they're like, man, I can't. The statement that they'll typically make is, man, it's hard to find good people. I can't find any good people. Well, they're stuck at that point, and they will never excel past that particular point of revenue or people, because they have yet to figure out how to trust people and release control of certain aspects of their business so that they can go work on the next level of accelerated growth. And that'll happen. And they'll have 7 people, and they'll hire one, and they'll let go of one, or somebody will quit, and they'll be in a spin cycle, and they'll never be able to figure out how to get out of it because they have yet to figure out how to trust the fact that other people can do things as equally good as them or potentially better if they got out of the way.
Preach. I've felt that in almost every position, every role, every van, every phone call that client, that you've had to make. That is the battle, the bramble of like cutting through the hard stuff and realizing that if you work on yourself, if you work on your business, if you turn inward, reflect, grow, and take the time and put focused concentration into it, it will actually pay you in dividends on the other side. Like it'll pay you back the time that you thought you were losing by stopping and working on that.
Yeah, and again, let's be very clear on this. Like, if I am at a position right now where I can look in retrospect and say that this is what's happened. When I was in the moment, there was levels of, is this going to work? Is this going to work? And I can say now pretty confidently that it does. You just have to make sure you have the right people on your team and trust them. And at the end of the day, now this is one benefit that I have from how I'm wired is if it doesn't work out, if there is failure, if somebody does let me down, I'm pretty adaptable to starting over and not letting it hold me down, right? So we've had issues, we've had mistakes, we've had people that have not made good decisions, and we've had to grow from that and learn. But I can say this, at a level of at a point, and I would say let's just bounce back to say 2012, 2013, 10 years ago, a decade ago now. Wow. I had a level of pride and arrogance, maybe some ego, that I was probably the most knowledgeable of all of our systems, most knowledgeable of how to get everything done, and I could sit behind a desk and really direct everybody in what needed to be done and have all the answers to all the questions. And I can say now, a decade later, that I am probably one of the least knowledgeable about everything that we do and all the systems that we touch and all the things that we do. And there are people that are in our organization that are significantly wiser, smarter, more intelligent, and sharper on those things than I am. And it is now my level of pride and arrogance and excitement of the fact that we do have those smart people here and that they can do things. If we go back to the spreadsheet example, I was the only person in our organization at that point that could have put that spreadsheet together, and I probably had help at that point. Now I've got a guy on our team that can shoot out and make some incredible Google Sheets for anything that you need. And he can do it in about a quarter of the time that it would take me to do it. And that's an excellent component because that frees me up to have, these conversations, but it frees me up to talk to business leaders that are 10 times our size and can consult with me on things that I need to be working on now to grow our business to get to that point. I can't do that by being the smartest guy and being the one that can do all the spreadsheets and the one that can know all about the master key systems and the one that can know all about the access control systems that we do. I have to release those out to other people, and those people that have those responsibilities now do them with such excellence because we released it to them and put them in responsibility of those particular tasks. I think I went off the rails on that one, but
I like how it was like the bid in engineering turns out to be engineering yourself, putting yourself up for the bid, so that's excellent. Yeah. Moving from that bid engineering quoting, using that and getting into the project management side of things as the project is going through its life cycle. What do you feel like are maybe the two most critical moments in completing the job as the boots hit the ground? And
communication is one. Like it's easy for anybody to say that, right? But communication is huge. So I've failed at this a lot. Now, a lot of the things that I've learned over the years is because I'm a moron in some aspects. Like I've made bad decisions. I talk about this a lot, and I tell our team this quite frequently because it's ingrained in my head. at one point, we had the largest estimate, the largest quote, and the largest project that we had ever had at that point. It was $150,000. And I did not communicate well with the developer, and they pulled me off the project. So I had a $150,000 project that was record-breaking, and then it got taken away from me. And it was embarrassing. It was gut-wrenching, because I had told everybody in the company, guys, we got this really great opportunity. It's going to be amazing. And then I had to walk in and say, sorry, guys, I lost it because I didn't communicate. The lesson that I learned from it, going back to what I was just talking about earlier, is too much control, too much under my plate, right, or on my plate, too many things that I'm responsible for, and not letting somebody else take responsibility for it. So it put me at a cap, which means we as an organization could not take on a project of that size because we were too busy, and I was too busy focusing on the $10,000 jobs, okay? So communication is huge. So now moving into this phase of where we're at, we have a lot of automation. So we've got a lot of emails that go out. As soon as a quote is approved, as soon as it's converted to a site visit, and as soon as things are done, we get these email alerts that send out to a customer to let them know and connect the project manager to that person. But the initial site, and the turnaround time from communication. So our sales team is committed to trying to get quotes turned around in 24 hours because it's communication, right? So if you want to have a successful project and you want to have a successful completion of a project, it all starts with communication at the very beginning and throughout. People are easy to work with across the board as long as you keep them in the loop of what's happening. And because there's going to be hiccups, there's going to be road bumps. No project is perfect, but the problems that happen are typically around, and what you'll see, there's this weird cycle that happens in the world of project management. So you find somebody that doesn't communicate well, and so they get started on a project and they forget about something, and they forget to tell somebody about something, and then so then weeks down the line, that pops up as an emergency. So I forgot to schedule John to be out there in 2 weeks to pull a permit or whatever. Well, now 2 weeks later, everybody's waiting for that to happen, and I forgot about it. So now I have to drop everything that I'm doing and retool and get somebody there. Well, what happens when that takes place is whatever they were actively working on gets put on pause. So now I've got 6 plates spinning simultaneously because I failed to communicate on the progression and communicate on follow-up. So those are key, right? Follow-up, communication are really two of the big factors in that, and that may be very simplistic in thought, but it's the thing that I've found to be the most taxing. And the way that we've tried to work with it is simplify everything down into a task. So you need a permit, it's a task. You need to schedule a site walk, it's a task. You need to set up training, it's a task. Figure out a way to break all of those steps down to where it can be highly visible and you can see every component of that process and every component of that project, and you can know if it's happened or not. Because when you don't have that, then that's when you typically are bouncing around and everything's an emergency.
Yeah. Yeah, we were talking about you'd seen Will Houston with Stice Lock. That was his kind of main thing too on Bid2Bank. He talked about that line of communication, and the more and more people I talk to who are running their show, and the more that in my role that I have to communicate with the client or communicate with operations, it's so central that you can communicate, and it's also not. It's not like abundantly common. It feels that is something that people usually lack in, and it kind of makes you wonder.
Well, it's common in the trades. It's common in the service industry. So I'm in the midst right now of I purchased a new construction home, and the process of which that has happened and the follow-up on that is horrendous. So I'm living this in real time right now. I've got a list of things that are supposed to be done, and there's no follow-up. There's no communication. When is it going to happen? Nobody knows. Is it going to happen? Nobody knows. When you ask about it, you might get an answer back in a couple of days. There's no consistency and there's no visibility. And if you dive into the real guts about it. It's the fact that the people that are managing those things are so saturated with work, and they don't have a good way to follow up or a good way to stay on top of it. So what you were just talking about, even in your role, having even if it's not provided for you through your current project management system or whatever, is literally, and this is, I did this when I started down early in the days. Like, I've gone through different iterations, right? So early in the days when I was doing effectively project management, sales, purchasing, and all that stuff, and before it got out of control and I had to delegate, I had a literal sheet of paper on my desk, and I wrote down to-do list every day, what I was supposed to prioritize. And then I would work and check them off. And all of my notes were there. And then before I left that desk at the end of the day, I took anything that I had not completed and wrote it on the next day's task list before I left. So I knew exactly what needed to happen the first thing that I came in. And it was the most productive, most communicative that I'd ever been in any roles. And it was so rudimentary, so analog. We're in a completely different world right now where you've got so many screens and so many productivity apps that can push all that information to you. But just as simple as something as simple as that completely changes the game. And as long as you're staying consistent with it and true to whatever principle that is, it's literally, people are very, very okay with delays as long as they know where things are at in the progress. Nobody wants surprises and nobody wants to get put off. So as long as you have a method, either in software or analog, that you can stay on top of that. And then, the biggest thing is when you're trying to scale is how do you replicate that and have a consistency? Because the way I might do it may be different than the way that two other project managers may do it. And then you start to have breakdown in consistency. So that's where, a software and management, all those things come in play.
Yeah, and you're hitting the nail right on the head with, I think I read something just this week about it. It just simply said success is consistency. So it is making sure that it's not only consistent across the board, like you're talking about, that everybody is kind of playing by the same rules, so that when they do communicate, they're not talking soccer to football, or something like that. But also staying at it and taking, at the end of the day, taking that 2 minutes to put those things you didn't complete on next day's list can change the game, just like you said.
One thing that I've seen, and I'll try to keep this as short and concise as possible, I've had a unique opportunity to go to a lot of manufacturing facilities. And where we don't manufacture anything, we're not we're not putting pieces of things together. There's a lot to be learned about the way that they do things consistently. So if you were to think in terms of, so we can talk about locks, but let's just take it out of that into car manufacturing. If every person on the assembly line decided that they were going to assemble a car in a little bit of a different way because it suits them best, what kind of safety ratings do you think would be out there for any car manufacturer? Because, Bob decides that he likes to put the seats on last and instead of third like he's supposed to. So sometimes the seats don't get bolted down, like it's not a big deal. But and we take that mentality across the board when it comes to smaller businesses. Bob over there likes to do it this way and John likes to do it this way. And so we just allow everybody to just kind of make their own path. Well, that's great until it doesn't work well. And then, who's at the end of the day, what brand is the one that's responsible for that, right? If your company is responsible for it, then what's your consistent methodology, your consistent path? Going back to the small business, a lot of times it's all in the owner's head, and he doesn't take the time to document it and share it, so therefore nobody else can follow that same path because it's not been clearly defined.
Yeah. So we've been I really like this. We've been touching a lot, like, internally and how those things matter, from the marketing and the engineering and the focusing on, working on yourself and what we just talked about. But it's all dancing around this customer experience. And so from the customer experience point of view, can you maybe just elaborate on what you feel is maybe most important in that customer experience, or how LockDoc has maybe handled that or shaped systems around that most important thing that you feel?
So We're focused heavily on core values. We have our core values that we try to run all of our filters through. But the three actionables, we have a Monday morning conference call, 7:45 every morning. Every person in our company is on it for 15 minutes. We have a couple of quick highlights around what's happening in the week or whatever. I get to close out that meeting, and the thing that I am very consistent with is reminding our team of the three actionables that we can do every single day. So our core values are kind of like the guiding principles, the guidelines that we should stay with. But then when it comes down to the actionables, what should I be doing every day? Three things. One, helpful and kind communication, the way that we communicate internally to each other. So if I'm talking to a team member, I want to be helpful and kind. I don't want to be a jerk. I don't want to respond nastily. I want to be helpful and kind, generous. Secondly is fast response. If you text me, you call me, you email me, if you need help with something, I'm probably needing it quickly because that's why I've asked. So how do we elicit fast response internally? And then third is solving problems. So at the end of the day, that's what we do as an organization is we solve problems. But we can start with that internally. If Sam needs help with something and I have the ability to help him, then I want to work with him to solve that problem. And my concept with that, and we've talked about that a lot, is if we do those three things internally, it is natural, ever so natural for us to do that externally. If we're doing the opposite of those three things internally, if we're talking like jerks to each other, cussing each other out, and just totally irresponsible, if we are slow responding internally, if we don't really care about responding to emails or text messages or whatever internally, and if we're not helping to solve problems internally, then how difficult is it for us to flip 180 degrees externally to do that with our customers? So customer experience for me is all about the internal experience first. And if we do that and we focus on that, which is my job, right? And that's our leadership's job, is to make sure that that's being handled internally. If that's the case, externally is going to happen on a high level of consistency. So those are the three actionables that we talk about a lot. To measure against that, we do customer survey. So every single time that we finish a job for somebody, it sends them an email. We get probably about 15% response on it. So it's not, it's a sampling, which is what you're going to get anywhere. On a scale of 1 to 10, how likely are you to recommend us to a friend or a colleague? So, concept of a net promoter score. And we measure that on a regular basis, and we report on it every single Monday morning on that conference call. So we're trying to roll that into a consistent cycle where, one, if we're doing those three things, helpful and kind communication, fast response, and solving problems, then it's going to show up in those reports. If we start to see those reports lower, or we get some low scores, then we're going to go back in and figure out it's most likely one of three of those things, if not all of them.
Wow, that is excellent advice. I mean, those three things, I imagine, create, like, as you try to make them actionable, they create a culture, and that culture kind of emanates from the inward out, and into what LockDoc does online, what LockDoc does in your building, those sorts of things.
Yeah, I mean, the thing that I've picked up from other people that are significantly wiser and smarter than me is creating that level of consistency. And again, it's all starting kind of what we do inside these four walls and how we operate here. And if we start to sense that that's slipping here, then it's most likely slipping externally as well. But it's a wise man, Lucas Baselli, who's the CEO of Asa Abloy Americas, basically says the easiest thing to change is the thing that is farthest away from the customer.
Yeah.
So when you look at your organization, where is the closest thing or the farthest thing away from the customer? Because that is the easiest thing to start a change, and it's going to get you the most impact all the way to the end of the customer. So you as an individual, if you don't feel respected in the workplace, you don't feel that you're valued in the workplace, you don't feel that the products that you're installing are quality, how are you going to communicate that to the customer? You're going to show up late. You're going to be a jerk to them. You're not going to care about what's going on. You're going to put things in sloppily because that's the way that you feel that it's being carried out. So if I can change that at the start, then you're going to get the biggest impact on the long term.
Definitely. So from the customer experience, we move into the bank aspect, and I tailored this question to you just because I've followed LockDoc for a while, and I know that you guys do invest back. And I think actually LockDoc was probably one of the earlier companies, if not the first, that I started seeing internal training from a standpoint of having all your guys sit and learn a little bit every week so that they're growing and that they're learning. I know that growing and learning more and being excellent in my craft and being the better tech, that's something I say often on the podcast is hashtag be the better tech. And it's just this idea that you are out there to put in better work every single time. That has been a passion of mine, but I do feel that it's almost been fueled by the guys that I've worked alongside in my career who have not wanted that. And they're just trying to get to beer o'clock, and it is what it is, and we'll run it this way. It's fine. Don't worry about it. And it's like, yeah, but that's not excellent. And why wouldn't you want to be excellent? So my question for you then is with LockDoc, how do you invest back into your company once you've been paid and you've allocated funds to that investment? What does that look like for you guys?
That's a very, very interesting question, and I don't know if that was on this sheet that you sent me. So this is kind of off the cuff. All right. So if it was, I didn't understand it that way. Here's the deal. So as an organization, and I feel like we are very fortunate in this aspect. Myself and my business partner, again, both came through the ranks, so to speak, right? So understanding exactly what it takes to do the work. We also were very focused on reinvestment and growth. So, a lot of companies may be depleting their net income or their profits annually to benefit the owner. And what we had established early on was a mentality of reinvestment into the organization because we were looking at it from a long-term growth standpoint. So with that said, everything that we do is very structured, very budgeted, and very target based because that's, the old adage, what's measured is managed. That works, right? So we put forth dollars and time. So it's not just dollars, but time into people. And we do that through our regular scheduled meetings. And then we have not been overly successful with it, but we continue to try to reiterate to get better at it on continued education. So we have an entire training facility dedicated here, and we also have a training director designated for that. So a person that is only job is focused on training. He does not go out and do service calls and then come back and do training. He is a training director. And we have a training section of our facility set up. So it's about, say, 1,000 square feet of space that has multiple doors, access control panels, wiring, all that stuff. So we can practice drilling, cutting, installing any type of hardware. And we do that also at the onset of hiring. We've got a training program that each employee goes through. The continued education thing is the one thing that I wish we were better at, and we're continuing to try to improve on it, which is that a person is constantly coming back in for additional certifications or different training methodologies to keep it fresh. But we also do that every Wednesday morning. We have had this for about 16 years, every Wednesday morning at 7 a.m., barring, and I guess I'm probably too real when I say these things, barring Christmas, Thanksgiving, and the 4th of July. So 3 weeks out of the year, we don't have a Wednesday morning meeting, but outside of that, we have a Wednesday morning meeting that is 90 minutes long, and we've had several different versions of it, but it always starts with an all hands in the room. We feed everybody breakfast, and we we start out the meeting with one positive thing. Everybody shares what's something positive that's happened in your world over the last 7 days, just to kind of get a temperature of what's going on, and to start the meeting on a positive note. Like, let's get our mindset on optimism and positivity. So we do that, and then we'll have some important information Most of the weeks we have breakouts. So we separate everybody because we've gotten such a larger group now. It's harder to disseminate information to everybody at the same level. So we do breakouts and we send them off into different subgroups, and they'll go through different cycles. So say the locksmith service team will go and they'll do a training on door closers. Maybe the next week they'll go do a training on the proper way to put in a purchase request. And then the next week they'll go do some app development training where they learn how to do a new process in our software. And then everybody kind of rotates around. So we do that every week. And then once a month, we do a business meeting with our entire company. Everybody comes in. We go over our financials. We go over our targets. We report on the previous month. So whatever day we're recording this on, the next meeting that we have is actually our business meeting. So we'll go over the previous month's information. Each team reports on their process and their progress. And then we'll talk about the company as a whole. And then we also do a profit-sharing program associated with that to try to reinvest back into our team. So, there's a lot of that time spent. And I've heard a lot, because I get a lot of questions about that, is do you realize how much money that you're, time and money that you're losing by having that all-hands meeting every week? And I'm like, I think it's vital. Like, I can't see a world without it at this point. It is a way to connect. It's a way to sit down and let people know that we care about more than just them producing a service call or turning a screw or answering a phone or creating an invoice, whatever the case may be. This is where we're headed as a company. This is how far we've made it. This is where we want to go. And here's ways that we can get better. We'll have classes. A couple of weeks ago, we had a class for our administrative staff on better ways to use Google Workspace. So tips and tricks for Google Docs, tips and tricks for Google Sheets, because that's the platform that we use. And if they're better at it, then they're going to be better at it. So that's a reinvestment of resources that doesn't teach them how to turn a screw better. We have had classes. We are big on personality assessment. So we'll take time and teach how each person's characteristics of their personality interacts with others, because that's an investment in people. If I know that this person is going to get triggered if I come at them, in a certain way, well, that is a huge improvement, because now I could have a better conversation with that person versus just ticking them off every time that I walk in the room. That's a people investment. And it reduces conflict in the workplace. It reduces wasted time because people don't communicate at the same level. Like, there's more to training than just teaching people how to install hardware. Figuring out how to work better as a human is so underrated and so undervalued. And we push it all off and say, that's not for us. We're a blue-collar work environment. Well, no, but you also make each other angry every time you walk in the door because that guy's grouchy and nobody knows how to communicate with him.
Yeah. Yep.
And that guy just popped in your head because you know who he is.
That's right. Wonderful. Yeah, those are wonderful ways to invest, and I'm so glad that you see the value and you focus on the personality types and how they interact with one another, maybe what their wings are. Do you know the Enneagram? Okay.
Yes. So we don't use Enneagram. We've used Myers-Briggs. I did a lot of research on Enneagram, and then we moved over to this platform called Culture Index. There's a few different versions of it out there, but the one we use, it basically has like a 7-point characteristic and shows how people align with each other. My gosh, it is hugely accurate. Yeah. Wild. So the thing that I struggled with Enneagram was like the identification around it, and then it's a little bit more broad. Mm-hmm. So it kind of puts people in some bigger buckets, and then you have some variations on it. The one we use puts people in the same type of big buckets, but it also gives you the I'm trying to think of a good analogy here. It gives you the system preferences of each person as well, so you can dial in the equalization, right? So where you and I may be very similar, I may have a higher emotional status than logical. So you may approach things very logically first and then emotionally. I may approach them emotionally first and then logically. Well, we can look everything else exactly the same, but if we bring you an issue, you may go, well, let me process this from a logical standpoint first, and they bring it to me, and I'm going to throw the table and flip stuff around because I approach it from an emotional standpoint. And that's a huge difference where the Enneagram stuff doesn't always take those things into consideration.
Right. And that's called a 7-point index?
It's called Culture Index.
Culture Index. Awesome. Yeah, that's a peach. I feel like someone just grabbed that and is like, oh, I got to figure out this tech.
It's a game changer for us. I mean, you can Google it, Culture Index. We started it probably 4 years ago, hardcore, and man, I'm super passionate about it. But it was a game changer for us. It's one of these little things that you pick up over the course of business. It's like, my goodness, if I'd have had that 10 years ago, if I'd have had that 15 years ago, how much faster would we have accelerated growth? Number one, because I would have understood myself a lot better. I have so many quirks that I have worked around for so many years, and once I understood them and understood why they were that way, well, I can embrace that. Man, I can run hard at it now because I can say, like, hey, I would love to say that I'm going to do this, but I know better. If I don't write it down right now or put it on my calendar, or if I don't delegate it to somebody, then it's not going to happen because I know that now. But 10 years ago, I would have pretended like I was going to do everything. So, and then learning that across the board, understanding how to communicate. One of the huge things that I've found value in with just Culture Index, and I'll leave you with this, is it's a natural for me and a lot of people that kind of run and operate a business to assume that everybody understands what I'm thinking or what I intend to say when I say what I say. So, as to say, when I say we want to go, the example goes, we want to start a branch in Charleston, South Carolina. Okay, so that's a statement that I've made over the last year. I can naturally assume that everybody in the room understands that we need to make sure our system is scalable, and we have crafted out a way to add an additional branch, that we have started looking for office space, that we know that we're probably going to have to relocate somebody. Do we have any acquisition targets down there? What are our main customer components down there? Do we have any vendor connections down there? Do we have any existing customers that can expand down there? Those are all the things that are in my head. But all I said was, we need to start a branch in Charleston. Then I could very easily get frustrated when I approach our app development team and say, did you guys get the branch expansion set up? And they're like, no, you didn't tell us to do that. And I'm like, I told you we were going to go start up in Charleston. That is a natural thing. So, one of our core values is defined expectations. Don't be frustrated with unmet expectations if you've not clearly set them. That is 100% a core value that is put in place for Chad Lingafelt, because I can get easily frustrated with people if we're not meeting the expectations that I did not clearly define. And that's something that I learned dramatically through Culture Index, that is naturally wired into me. So now that I know that, when I say things like, we need to start a branch in Charleston, South Carolina, I stop myself and say, I need help putting a plan together and documenting it. So let me grab the two people associated with it and get the thoughts out of my head, get it over to you so you know what the actionables are, and then is there anything that I'm lacking clarity on? And then we can progress forward from there. I didn't know that 10 years ago. I just assumed that everybody else was ignorant of what I was saying and just didn't care, So, it's that's why I say it's a game changer for me as a whole, but then for everybody in our organization, because we can naturally see this guy over here, he's not going to follow up on details. So don't give him the job that he's got to follow up on details, because that's not his strong suit. You're asking him to do something that he's not naturally capable of doing, and he's gonna fail on it 9 times out of 10. So don't expect him to be perfect. So that's the lessons I've learned from it.
So I always like to do a humbling question towards the end,
Sure.
just to see like where people are, because a lot of times this podcast, draws out such good information from that bid to that bank, that it's also like, well, how what is someone in your position looking forward like to? How are you fixing things that maybe you're dealing with? So what's one area that you feel like in this process that maybe you feel LockDoc is soft on, or you'd like to get better at, or you'd like to see improvement in?
Yep. So that's an easy question for me to answer, and I agree with you. Most of these podcasts are chest thumping. These are all the amazing things that we do, and nobody really wants to talk about the bad stuff. We're terrible with follow-up. And I would say that it's a cultural issue, mostly stemming from me, unfortunately, because it's just not a strong suit that I have embraced. I've put a lot of factors in place and delegated a lot of that to other people so that we've gotten better at it. But it shows itself in a couple of different ways. One, we don't do a really good job following up on estimates. We've put a lot of automation in place to try to help assist with it, but the fact is, if we send somebody a quote, and this was really bad 3 years ago, if we sent somebody a quote and they didn't approve it, then we had no idea if they got it or not. So we would just waste time putting quotes together. It's like, well, we did a really good job. We put together 1,000 quotes this year, but also only 500 of them were seen. The other 500 are in the ether somewhere that nobody knows about. So that was one thing, but we were not good about picking up the phone and making sure somebody got it. We've put some automation to help with that, but we're still bad at just picking up the phone and making sure somebody got a quote. But it also shows itself internally. When somebody asks a question about something, we at times don't have good mechanisms for follow-up. So you come in and say, can we do this new initiative? And we have a conversation about it, and it's maybe a really good idea or maybe it's a terrible idea, but it gets buried into the 400 other things that came up that day, and then there's not really a good closure point to go back and say, you know what, we decided this is not a good idea, or yes, this is a good idea and we're going to run after it. So those are two ways that they kind of show up from a follow-up standpoint internally and externally, but it's just something that we really continually need improvement in.
Yeah, I think that is industry wide, from just like even from like construction to security to low voltage. That is a hurdle that I don't think you're the only one trying to get over. So yeah, that's good. So I guess my final question then for the podcast, and this has been excellent information, I really appreciate you coming on here, like I've said, is based on your experience moving through everything that we've talked today, all the way from the beginning of what the marketing and the first experience they're getting out of LockDoc, all the way to the end there where we were, tying up how we invest it back in once we get it. What do you feel like the most critical part is in the completion of the job from start to finish?
I mean, I guess the simple answer, and I don't want to try to overly complicate it, it's just doing what you say you're going to do. And it's probably the thing that's cost us the most amount of money over the course of my career, is if we say we're going to do something, we stick with it until it gets done, even if it's not profitable. And yeah, it's frustrating at times because I think the biggest thing that a lot of people do is they overpromise and underdeliver. And we've probably been guilty of it as well. And I can't say that we're perfect by any stretch, but just doing what you say you're going to do. If we promise somebody something and then for whatever reason things change, figuring out a way to own it and then resolve it. If we said that we were going to put in a new door and frame, and then we got there and we figure out that the frame is going to be impossible to take out, we told them that they were getting a new door and frame. So what are the elements that we have to go through? What are the processes that we have to go through to get them a new door and frame, if that's what the choice is? It's really, huge. And again, I'm trying not to oversimplify it, but that's, at the end of the day, you're not going to have a business if you continue to not do what you say you're going to do. Like that's just a hurdle that you're going to not be able to overcome.
Excellent, man. Thanks so much for being on the podcast. That's it. That's all the questions I got today. But like I mentioned, before we got started, I'd love to have you back, man, and just kind of talk about your story and what you think of the industry on that aspect. But I really appreciate you coming on, and I'm glad that we got this out. This is good stuff. They're going to love this one. So I'm going to pump it up. And can you I always like to have my people end where they're telling they're telling the listeners where to find them. So can you tell us where we can find maybe you and LockDoc and those sorts of things?
So early on in life, I didn't have the foresight to come up with a really cool handle, like Uncle Baer. It just was not wired in me. With all of the marketing that I've thought about, like that was never a deal. So I'm pretty simple. Chad Lingafelt. The only hard part is spelling my last name, but Chad Lingafelt is pretty much the handle on Twitter, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, wherever. And then LockDoc Security, again, overly simplified, LOCDOCINC across all the platforms. You can Google us up and find us pretty rapidly. We on YouTube as well. We've got tons of videos on YouTube similar to this, but we also have some other cool stuff on there. Like if you're into locksmithing, right? We've got 3 years of locksmith picking championships that we do. It's one of the fun things we do in March every year, the March Madness style. And so there's some fun videos there to watch on that, and just some of the kind of neat stuff that we're trying to do inside. But Chad Lingafelt and LockDoc Inc. is the easiest way to find me on all the platforms.
Awesome. Well, you guys heard it. Check it out. Go give it a follow and a subscribe, because now more than ever, after having a podcast, I understand how important that is to get a like and a follow. Yes. It really pumps that stuff out there. So go follow LockDoc Inc. and Chad, and check him out on YouTube and stuff like that. Thanks for coming on, man, and we'll have to have you back soon, but I appreciate it.
Anytime, man. Appreciate the invite. Thank you very much.